What happens when passion meets unending opportunities? When a chance is provided to pursue a dream? In America, the African diaspora are marrying ambition and opportunity and creating a standard of emergence and success in various industries. These individuals are setting a precedent in their pursuits.
Hi, I'm Kallie Ejigu, and this is The Benchmark. Hello and welcome to The Benchmark. I'm Kallie Ejigu, and today we have documentary filmmaker Saaret Yoseph, who's in the process of finishing her first documentary film, The Red Line DC Project, which is about the underground graffiti scene in DC. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with your background a bit because I think it's interesting that the transition that you've made.
Yeah.
You were an assistant editor and writer for TheRoot.com, which for some people who don't know is an online newspaper blog website that kind of shows the perspective of the black population here in the States. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like and your experience?
I was with The Root for about 2 years, fresh from Ethiopia. I went to Ethiopia after graduating from undergrad, and was there for 6 months and was writing there. And I had written one piece that was sort of controversial and was talking about the kind of discrimination that I had experienced there as an Ethiopian American because the restaurant that I had encountered was catering more towards foreign clientele. So I wrote about that, and I came across like another writer when I came back to the States that I was kind of showing my clips to, and they suggested that I pitch it to The Root, doing an adaptation of that piece. And I did, and that one piece kind of spun into a full-blown job with them. So I started as editorial assistant and moved on to assistant editor after my first year there, and was writing pieces for them, but mainly just kind of managing the site and kind of dealing with other writers, getting them paid, and reading their works and posting it to the site, kind of culling from reader submissions and things like that. So it was an amazing experience, very small staff, and I definitely kind of got my feet wet in journalism through that.
And I don't know if it's reflective of maybe your perspective or maybe if it's TheRoot.com itself, but a lot of the things that you wrote about dealt with Black women's identity here in the States and how it's reflected or misrepresented in the media. And it could be that, like I said, it could be maybe it's reflective of the site, or is that something that just genuinely interests you?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that's reflective of the site. The Root is definitely about giving a voice to the Black community, and not that it's this monolithic community at all, but kind of showing the breadth of conversation there and the difference of opinion. My particular opinions tend to be kind of rooted or pulled from cultural identity, and I think that as a Black woman, I kind of had questions about how I was represented or how my community was represented. So that interest was kind of already there, and it was the perfect platform for it because it was a kind of good marriage of discussion.
And you also wrote a lot about, and even just like what I think you're about as well, is like how our generation is kind of in this conundrum of like bad economy, being too educated, staying close to home, being very cultured in kind of like a two fronts that we've been kind of remain infantile, but we're actually at an age where maybe our parents were already purchasing their first homes or whatever. What do you think it is about our generation that is facing this kind of odd space in terms of identity formation?
Well, it's I kind of hesitate, to answer that question immediately, just because I try to shy away from being any, one group speaker box, or to say, this is the voice of Generation Y. But I did a piece about kind of our Generation Y's kind of particular work ethic, and it was just kind of pulling from stories from friends that I kind of was just in awe of their kind of hustle to make their dreams happen, basically. And I think the kind of maybe difference with our generation in comparison with others, like the baby boomers and Generation X, for example, is, and it's often confused for probably being, you know, demanding or thinking that we kind of deserve to be, you know, recognized sooner than we should be. But for me, I kind of wanted to find a silver lining to that, or maybe see a way that other generations might not kind of have like the in on. And for me, it was basically about not settling, and I think that's probably what is unique to our generation, in that we want to have our cake and eat it too. We're kind of having the 9-to-5 or the cubicle job, and then at night doing whatever that we want to do in terms of starting our own business, or being actors or writers, or whatever the case may be, and feeling that you absolutely can do it all. So I kind of just pulled my friends and just kind of profiled them. I had a friend that, you know, moved to LA, you know, just kind of stacked his paper here and kind of got as much as he could, but it was just very much about, I'm going to make it happen, and I know that the odds are against me, but I don't care. And I think that's definitely kind of what's distinct about Gen Y, because in the environment that we are in with the economy and things like that, things don't look good, you know. Things if anything are kind of, the signs are telling us to slow down and take the safe route, but I don't think that that's kind of going to happen at all.
I like to think of, I think you're a perfect example of this, but I think a lot of really great journalists are more so storytellers. And I know that you said that you don't want to be kind of like the spokesman for any one demographic or not.
Right.
But is there a story that you feel like you are about, like maybe women's rights, or like a beat that you think is like your life's, you know, this is the story genre that I am about?
Yeah, I wouldn't say any particular kind of story, but I am drawn more to cultural issues and to like issues of identity. Not particularly women's issues, but I'm curious about them, but I wouldn't say that that's kind of my background or my beat. But definitely cultural issues are something that I'm very much drawn to.
I think it's interesting that you said identity, because when you went like you said, you went to Ethiopia post undergrad.
Yeah.
You started a column, and you were talking about issues of identity as being an Ethiopian American.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so it's
not too painful.
No, not at all. I mean, it's definitely fond memories, you know. I just think that I was very, you know, kind of blessed to have that experience. It was a column to myself called Chronicles of a Diaspora Kid, with The Reporter, which is a newspaper in Ethiopia that is printed in Amharic and in English as well. So I read at about a 5th grade or 5-year-old level even.
Oh, you do? I didn't even know you could read.
Barely.
So you wrote in English.
I wrote in English, and I kind of talked about like my personal observations and tried to turn, you know, a narrative into kind of a meta-narrative almost, and making it a larger conversation about things that I thought other Ethiopians would be interested in, particularly the Ethiopian diaspora, because the time that I was there were so many people my age who were born in America and were coming back to either visit indefinitely, or, you know, just this is my kind of permanent stay here.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting, that kind of acclimation that was happening was something that obviously hit close to home, and something that I wanted to document. So in a weird way, it was kind of almost a journal, but like I said, I tried to draw it to larger issues, like kind of civility, for example, things that I noticed how people would talk to people who are, you know, waiters at restaurants and things like that, and the difference that I saw of being in Addis and being here, you know, the level of eye contact that's kind of missing, or the clapping that you might do to get somebody's attention, or, you know, I had a lot of time to just kind of be off on my own and going back and forth between work, because I was doing 2 other jobs as well.
Oh, goodness.
I was working with the Ethiopian Women's Lawyers Association,
Okay.
and I was also working with Addis Ababa University. So I got plenty of opportunities to ride the minibus, and that was always, interesting, because all eyes are just on the American girl in the car, but I got to observe plenty too. And I would see, old women and children kind of being pushed aside during those like mad rushes to get into cabs and things like that. And that was interesting to me because, traditionally there's this kind of perception of Ethiopian culture being about kind of like respect to elders and kind of patience and things like that.
When you're trying to catch
Exactly. So when you're trying to catch a cab, every person for themselves, and things like the construction that is happening, which is happening like crazy in Addis, and seeing these kind of high-rise folk baits next to these like shacks. So yeah, my experience at the Reporter was, pretty amazing. A nice kind of springboard into the world of journalism. But I was doing a column called Chronicles of a Diaspora Kid, and the Reporter is printed in English and Amharic, so I am very kind of remedial with my Amharic, so I was writing in English.
Right.
But basically the column was kind of a narrative of my experiences as an Ethiopian American living abroad, and what I was kind of noticing at that time, and it was just, pretty serendipitous what was happening, that all these kind of Ethiopian, people, members of the Ethiopian diaspora were there in Addis at the same time as I was, for different reasons, but I noticed that people were kind of ready to just like plant their roots there, even if they were born in America, they're ready to stay indefinitely or permanently and kind of figure out life there. And that transition was very much the transition that I was going through, and that I was kind of interested in exploring, and using my kind of personal experiences to have a larger conversation about Ethiopian society and life in Ethiopia. So things like civility and how people would be talking to their waiters and waitresses in restaurants, and the difference that and Saaret, yes, definitely, and the kind of contrast that I saw, where sometimes you wouldn't look people in the eye, or you would like clap to get their attention and things like that, but that Ethiopian tradition, or the views on Ethiopian traditions are that it's kind of so much about respect and politeness and patience and things like that. But then I would be riding the minibuses, and I would see kind of during rush hour, people pushing aside the elderly women and the children and things like that. So those kind of contrasts about what we think about the culture and what it actually is, or how it's changing, all the development that's happening in Addis,
right,
where these like folk baits are next to these shacks, like the Sheraton used to have these huge community outside your window, and now like I think those are essentially gone now. So that kind of Western influence and that kind of overall development was definitely something that I had an interest in and was definitely driven to talk about. But recognizing that essentially I'm an outsider looking in, so I didn't claim to be an authority. It was just like, this is kind of my observation,
right,
and this is my attempt to kind of start a dialogue with people who are like me, with people who aren't like me. We may look the same, but we have different points of view.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I got definitely some good and some bad feedback, especially with the more controversial piece about the kind of catering to foreigners that I personally saw.
Could you talk about that article and that experience?
Yeah. As well? Well, basically the situation was that my sister and I were denied service, and I looked around me and I saw European faces, and I saw basically this kind of disconnect, where I was talking to Abasha men and Abasha women who were saying, no, you don't belong here, and that kind of like just shocked me. So I spoke to that and kind of spoke to this feeling that I think that Western is almost better, and it's not always said explicitly. Sometimes it's more implicit, or the way that people treat you in that particular instance. So I just kind of wanted to ask, who are we interested in benefiting? Who do we want to welcome? And essentially, I think the answer should be everybody. But I don't know. Something that is really important with my writing personally, or just kind of my process as a writer, or just somebody who's interested in stories, is asking these questions, and trying to kind of not necessarily play devil's advocate, but try to work out some kind of conversation that I think is welcoming of anybody who wants to join.
And what I think is interesting about that conversation you were having with yourself about this, like, catering to the West, I think people forget also about the culture of poverty. I don't know if it's so much of a prejudice, but I mean, I'm sure you experience this. Like, when the diaspora go back, they blow money like it's nothing, because the rate of exchange is ridiculous. So they have no problem, like, blowing 2,000 birr in a night. And there are some places that are more than happy to cater to people like that, versus some places that immediately see, oh, that person's white, they're from the developed world, they have hard currency, they're going to spend their money properly.
And I mean, I think that's definitely a big part of it, that you kind of go after the money, and if you see dollar signs when you look at somebody, then of course you're going to be helping them out more than me. But it really just amazes me to think that some people are kind of surviving or trying to survive and essentially living in a city where oftentimes the prices that I see are the same prices over here. So I mean, that's the kind of, like, disconnect that I kind of wanted to speak to and address, and it's, I mean, not to say that, again, I'm an outsider coming in, so these things were favoring me. I could convert my dollars to birr, but for the people that are there, is the system or serving the people that actually live there? And
So what is it? I'm fascinated, because before we begin to talk about the documentary, you began as a writer. So I'm interested, what is it about the written form that compels you, or still compels you, versus, moving pictures or radio? I just kind of always had this thing with words, like, I remember, my mom still talks about me being 4 years old and, like, screaming, like, with a book in my hand, talking about, I can't read, why can't I read? And I think, ever since that time, or just, childhood, I've always kind of had this affinity for words and how things can be put together. Of all the words that you selected, you chose this for this book, or all the words you could have selected, you chose this. And I remember being in the 5th grade, and I think that's actually probably where it started. In the 5th grade, a teacher came up to me. She said, I think you're a really good writer, and there's this newspaper article that we want to respond to, and we want to have a student, write into the writer. And I wrote a letter to the journalist that wrote this piece. It was a negative piece about our school, and she printed it, and she talked directly to me, and she apologized. And seeing my words in print at, like, 10 years old was just beyond, and I think I kind of was just attracted to it ever since then. That the kind of the power and certainly the responsibility that you can have when your words are printed, but even personally, just kind of finding a new word. I have, like, dictionary.com. I have, like, word of the day that, it just, those kinds of things, I get excited about a new word. Having something to describe an emotion or a feeling is just, I think it's amazingly powerful to be able to describe how you feel. So yeah, words have always been my thing, but going beyond that and trying to explore, moving images right now is a challenge and amazing opportunity that I love just as much. I'm really fascinated when I talk to people to find out that nascent process, or that process that brought you to this moment right now. You're getting your master's at Georgetown in the Culture and Communication Technology program. You studied at UMBC English. But what happened in between, like, the 5th grade, when you had maybe that epiphany and now that, like, did you build upon that creativity? Were you involved in programs? Were you doing creative writing in your own private time, or how did that burgeon into this moment now?
I feel like the short answer is kismet. You know, I feel like the stars were aligned and brought me to this place right now to sit and talk with you. But no, I've just always kind of wrote for myself. And that was kind of like my niche that was like established in the family, not in any kind of, pressure or kind of, lockdown in any sense of the term, but I got a chance to kind of do my thing, and my family gave me room to write and to kind of express myself, and when I did, it was always kind of responded to well. So when I got to college, it just seemed like the most natural thing to gravitate. UMBC is very much a school about sciences.
Yeah.
So I was probably like one of the few English majors that I knew, but it was still kind of the best place to kind of
cultivate it.
Yeah, cultivate it and just create my own kind of space.
Right. Well, I think another fascinating thing for our viewers who may not know, but your sister's with Mithasevia, who I interviewed a few episodes back. I think it's fair for me to say, I think, as a viewer, that creativity may run in the family. or would you say that maybe it was supported, that your parents were incredibly supportive of following arts? Because unfortunately, a lot of Ethiopian parents don't allow that talent to be harnessed and kind of push their kids, go for the sciences.
Yeah. I think it was a little bit of both, to be honest. She's kind of always been visually inclined and had an eye for art and beautiful things, and words were my thing. And our parents, to their credit, were just very progressive and just kind of willing to let us explore those things. And the only kind of caveat with that, the only stipulation was be the best at it, and again, not in a pressure, in a kind of sense of pressure, but just go after it. If you're gonna go for it, go 100%. And I think that was the only stipulation that was made, or the only kind of demand that was made of me. Other than that, completely supportive.
So like I said, this is your first foray into film.
Yes.
So we touched upon it a little bit earlier. How has the writing process kind of pushed you into documentary film? And further than that, how did the subject come to you? Was it kind of like you decided, I'm going to go into documentary film and then find a subject, or was it, I guess, the chicken or the egg kind of question?
Yeah. It's not that difficult of a transition. Technically, yes, it's very challenging, but for me, it's always been about the story, and exploring these kind of different stories in depth. And what kind of spurred the project is I'm a commuter, and I ride public transportation all the time. My kind of daily encounters on the Red Line Metro between Union Station and Silver Spring in the DC metro area, there are just crazy amounts of graffiti on the wall, on the backs of buildings, and not so much like, on the train itself. That was happening for a time, but it's not so much the same as New York, where it's kind of more commonplace. So this is very much like a plot of land that's kind of been unofficially dedicated to graffiti. And I kept, I think for most people who are riding the train, you see it, but you kind of get used to it.
Right.
So I had been riding the train since I was probably about, 12 or 13. But probably a year ago, I started seeing one name next to an image, right? I would see J.U. next to a Kanye West bear from his album cover, or the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air next to Jew, or you know, all these kinds of images, and I would be like laughing to myself on the metro by myself, you know, and I just kept wondering, you know, who is this person? Who is associated with these images that I encounter every day? And from that question just kind of spiraled into this adventure, and it really has been an adventure, where I kind of cast a net to different arts organizations and said, you know, this is what I want to explore. I want to see if anybody else is paying attention to this graffiti, what they think of it, who determines whether it is vandalism or whether it's art,
right?
And really kind of the meaning behind these names on the wall, and the kind of appropriation of space that's happening there. Just so many questions, so many overlapping issues that I wanted to touch on, which, like I said, just kind of started and from this one experience that I had with this name, and I, you know, got to meet this person and kind of have a sit down, and it, what I want now is, it's more, for me, it's more than a documentary. It's the film is the end result, but it's a project, and it's a collaborative community project where I'm trying to say, is anybody else paying attention?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, take pictures. If you see things on the train that catch your eye, send them to me. And if you know, have a video that you want to take with your phone of something, go ahead and send it to me. But it's very much about kind of getting the community and the commuters to weigh in, because what I've kind of noticed with graffiti, and this is, you know, true of a lot of different conversations, it tends to be one way, where the people are just putting names on the wall and nobody gets to say anything about it or sound off. The people, the commuters that encounter it every day don't get to sound off. So this project is about allowing a platform for every single stakeholder to weigh in,
right.
For the property owners, for the city officials, for the commuters themselves, for the graffiti artists, to just kind of have a space to kind of, you know, have their opinions overlap. And it's not about, you know, saying what's right or wrong, it's just about opening the dialogue.
Right, a platform.
And for me, that kind of transition for writing to that wasn't that difficult, because I'm still asking the same questions. My medium is just different.
Right. So before we show the trailer, could you give a quick little snippet about what we're going to see and when we can expect to see the finished product?
Sure. So I'll answer the second question first. You can expect to see it at the end of this year, end of 2011. That is, you know, the goal that we're working for, but we're still, you know, very much in production and still doing interviews. But what you're about to see is a trailer of the documentary itself. So I've talked to a few folks from different nonprofit organizations, Midnight Forum and Words, Beats, and Life, Inc., which is sponsoring the project, and got a chance to talk to different graffiti artists who are prominent on the Red Line and ask them why they're even drawn to that space in the first place, and the kind of conflict that's happening between, you know, the graffiti that's up there. The city sometimes buffs over it, and what's going on in that space between Union Station and Silver Spring is that a pedestrian bike trail is being put there now.
Okay.
So they're bringing in more public artworks, and a lot of times with the public artwork that's, you know, legal, essentially graffiti
right. space,
they're bringing in graffiti artists to do it and get paid to do it. So that kind of, you know, valuation and that access is really interesting to me, where I kind of want to know what the difference between that mural is and that Jew piece with fresh prints.
Right, great. Well, so let's take a look at the trailer for the Red Line DC project by Saaret Yoseph, and then shortly after we'll take a quick commercial break.
A public canvas.
Double down kings. LAV shit.
I hit the red line so I can be known.
They're always talking about the red line, or, oh, I'm gonna go out tonight in pain.
The red line, most definitely.
Why the red line? Ask the old heads that.
There's a lot of history there. A lot of people who have gone on to do some great things got their start on that line.
The Red Line in D.C., the Red Line Metro train, is sort of like the holy ground for graffiti artists.
The Metropolitan Branch Trail is a trail that runs along the Red Line of the Metro. It is going to be an 8-mile trail that will run from Union Station up to Silver Spring.
The MBT, the Metropolitan Branch Trail, of course, this is supposed to be a more clean, respectable, air quotes, kind of area for commuters, bike riders, people getting exercise. To be able to go and have a pleasant experience that's not hindered by just what a lot of people would consider blight.
The Department of Public Works, one of our many services, is to provide graffiti abatement.
Getting up and you're taking the risk of going in a highly watched area, a train, the metro train rail, that's Metro Transit Police, DC Police, places you're absolutely not supposed to be, that has lights and fences and all sorts of security through in order to get there, and then to have the balls to do it and have something that rides, I think, gets a lot of respect, and then it gets a lot more people to see it.
The problem with removing graffiti along any metro line is that this is a prime area it's a prime area to tag for taggers. They know that their work of art is going to be seen by thousands of people a day, and so what happens is the minute you remove it, there's someone out there the next day, or there's someone out there that night to replace the graffiti.
They were putting out nearly $1 million a year just to paint walls white again every time someone came and put their name on it. So, of course, it's a cyclical issue. Every time you paint it clean, they come back to tag it again.
I'm going to constantly keep smashing the line because that's what I was taught to do, smash the red line, and to this day I'm still doing it.
There is probably a disconnect between graffiti artists and people who are out using this trail to commute or go jogging on the weekend.
As the city starts to place public art projects into those areas, there could be this kind of tussle for space.
In the way that it is not just one thing, right? It's even more vibrant.
Not an us versus them situation. I don't want to be recognized.
Like it or love it, like it's graffiti.
Things done changed in the hood since we done came to the hood and wrote our names in the hood. Now they say things change for the good, things change for the